It's great to see you all on this disgusting day. Because the day is so horrible, I'm going to make quite a feature of the process by which you all decide whether or not you're going out. And at a very basic level, that is probably one of the most important decisions that the Cox takes part in. I'm saying takes part because the crew need to be part of the discussion. Once you're underway, the Cox is in charge, and the reason for that is they're the only people who can see in front of the boat. The rowers, however experienced, may be offering advice that is inappropriate if there's a ferry bearing down on you. So, but in the moments leading up to leaving, everybody in the crew has something to say, and should say it if they feel like doing so. I should perhaps introduce myself. I've been in the Alipool Coastal Rowing Club since 2010, and in the SCRA, the Scottish Coastal Rowing Association committee, since it was formed at the very first regatta at Anstruther in 2010, I think it was. So we've been doing this for some time. I'm also on SASI, which is St Iles Skiff International, which is the international body that was set up when it became a sport that people were pursuing all over the world, which I find really exciting and rather fun. So I have been doing this for a while, but it doesn't mean to say that I'm immune from making mistakes. My father used to say that experience is what enables you to recognize a mistake the second time you make it, which is one of its perhaps only benefits. I'd like to start today by getting from you what you think what might be on a Cox job description. So in no particular order, if you have a suggestion, I'll write it down. So does anyone have any? Melanie?
Crew welfare.
Crew welfare, okay.
Weather conditions.
I'm sorry?
Weather conditions.
Weather conditions, yes. Yes, okay. Very apposite today. Any other possibilities? Yes.
An understanding of tides.
An understanding of the tides. Sorry, I'm slightly...
Yes, so tides, yes.
The tides. This is working, this doesn't seem to be so. And I'm not going to wear them in the boat today because they might get drowned. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes.
Clear communication. Clear voice.
Clear voice. Okay, so...
Clear commands.
Yes. Not always just about volume, but about attitude.
Ability to make decisions.
Yes.
And follow them through. So if you're the Cox and you feel that it's not safe or whatnot, you're happy to actually make that clear.
So we're not talking about ordinary conversation here, are we? No. Like what did you see on the telly last night?
Talking about Cox.
This is, yes. So, is decisive too strong, or will I?
So I said that previously, decision-making skills. So.
Decision-making skills, okay. Anybody else? Yes?
I think this is spelling out the obvious, so maybe everyone's just thought it's not necessary to say it, but physically steering and navigating the boat.
Yes, crucial. Yes. So, boat handling?
Yeah.
Melanie?
Possibly to give that identification of risk and hazards.
Yes, so how can we write that? Risk management? I'm not that small, so I'm going to start again here. What about knowledge? So there are skills and there's knowledge. Yes.
I was actually going to say motivating, but yes.
Okay, well, motivation.
Waters.
Yeah, local knowledge. I think it's good to have.
Okay, so that was motivation. Very important, and it's one of the Cox's jobs to tell the crew what a great job they're doing. Useful. And,
Especially on a day like today.
well, yes. That is very crucial, and especially for your area. So everybody, well, most clubs have a base that they operate from, and in the case of South Skye and Loch Alsh, that is Kyleakin, but for other clubs it's going to be different. And I guess the basic skills for a Cox when they're just starting out in a club are to know your own location, so to gather local knowledge about your own place, which can be different every day depending on the state of tide, the weather and so on. But you will find yourselves in other people's home waters. If you go to a regatta, you will end up in a place that looks completely different from Kyleakin, and it may involve a beach launch, for instance. So part of the learning journey for a Cox is to adapt to different places. But this is basic coxing. I'm going to pretend that you know nothing, which obviously is wrong. But those of you who know a lot more, that will have to bear with me, because we're starting from scratch here. And today, one of the things that I hope to do when we're on the water, if we get that far, is to practice leaving and arriving back at the ferry slip in a strong wind like today. So we're on the west coast, we all experience strong southwesterlies, or anything between south and west. That's quite a routine part of our weather pattern, isn't it? So it's actually quite sensible to do some practice when it's pretty strong from that direction. And then when you go out on a less strong day, you'll be a bit more confident. Okay, now, do we have anything else that we might need to... Do you guys routinely carry a VHF? Okay, and do you routinely call anyone up?
No.
I have a confession to make. Our club got in the way of the ferry once too often. We were put in the naughty step. Well, so we didn't think we were in the way, but the ferry did. The ferry was very, what's the word, risk averse. And so the harbour trust told us that we had to call in every time we go out. So this makes our Coxes use the radio routinely. But if you do use a radio routinely, then you really the Cox needs to know how to do that. Now, I have some handouts, and they have a list of Cox skills, but I'm not going to give you the handouts because then you'll end up reading them. Therefore, yeah. So, I think these two cover commands the boat. So even if the Cox is younger than you, even if the Cox is less experienced than you, they are in charge. And if you have another idea, then you have to do it quite diplomatically and not get in the way. Have we covered safety? We sort of have. This includes safety. But actually safety is the most important thing. So I'm going to write it at the top. And safety covers getting out of bad situations, but more importantly, it covers not getting into them in the first place. And the most important decision about that is whether we go out. So I will be covering that. Assess the situation. So, what other factors, apart from weather and tides, what other factors might change between one outing and another outing?
The crew that you have, how experienced they are.
Exactly. Not just how experienced, but how strong they are and how skilled they are, and whether they have any special needs. So you could lump that together as the strength of the crew, meaning not just physical strength, but their other strengths. So I'm going to write and strength. And if you've got a bunch of people you don't know, you're going to have to make a guess. You could ask them. They'll probably be happy to tell you what their experience is. You need to give them some kind of opportunity to say, I'm a bit deaf, or I have a heart condition, or I have to catch a bus in 20 minutes. You need to know these things before you set off. Now I've written, if you are wondering if the weather is too bad, it probably is. So how do we square that with today? Well, could there possibly be a reason for going out today?
Conditions.
Do you know about the different types of fun? A guy, an instructor at Lochiel Outward Bound told me this. There are 4 types of fun, but we normally only tell school children about the first 3. So type 1 fun is fine when you're doing it, and looking back on it, it was fun. That's type 1 fun. Type 2 fun wasn't fun at the time, but looking back, it was fun, which is the sort of fun that Lochiel specialises in. Type 3 fun is horrible at the time, and looking back, it was horrible. So that's the sort of fun you probably ought to avoid. And type 4 fun, which we don't tell the school kids about, is it seemed like a good idea at the time, but looking back, I wish we'd never done it. And that often involves alcohol and sometimes romance. So that's why we don't tell the children about it. But I'm hoping that we can keep to type 1 and type 2 fun. So today, when it's raining on your face, it might be type 2 fun, but I hope it doesn't go into type 3. So I'm going to go through a checklist that you need to go through as a Cox with a crew before you go out. And this isn't really rocket science. You need to check the oars, the rudder, the pins. Have you got the anchor? Are the footrest there? Is the bung in? Are the life jackets all okay? Are they worn correctly? If people have never put a life jacket on before, you need to check. Do you have a forecast? Do you know when the tide is? Do you have a waterproof means of communication? So, that is one possible waterproof means of communication, or you can have a phone in a bag. Any opinions about that?
I tend to have both, if possible.
Oh, okay, both.
You have to get the phone out.
If sorry.
You have to get the phone out of the bag to use it properly.
To some extent, yes. Wetness doesn't help. Yes. Any other comments about that?
If you have a radio on, you're going to hear what's going on around you in terms of other boats and stuff.
You'll be hearing fishing boats around here a lot, yes.
Yeah, or something else, yeah.
And fish farm boats, yes.
Yeah, you know if a big fish farm rib's maybe going to blast past you, you might get a heads up.
Yes.
Or not.
People who drive ribs tend not to spend much time on the radio, in my experience. Can anyone think of a possible advantage that a phone has that a VHF doesn't?
The exact
Location.
location. Those 3-word identifier thing.
Oh,
Is that the one?
what 3 words?
Yeah, that's it.
Yes, that's a thought. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah. Any other?
I'm thinking you could call someone that's on shore without calling an emergency.
Yes.
Yeah, without
Yes.
calling a lifeboat.
So that you can call anybody, whereas the VHF you can only call people who've got a VHF switched on. And there are quite a lot of situations which are sub-emergency, which you wouldn't necessarily want to call into the Coast Guard. But like, here's an example. I mean, supposing you set off from Kyleakin and you end up getting blown across. I mean, if you get too far from the shore, the wind gets stronger and stronger, the waves get bigger and bigger, and eventually you can't row against them. So your inevitable destination is Kyle of Loch Alsh. You're going to need a lift home. So it might be good to ring somebody in the club and say, oh, can you give us a lift and can you help us pull the boat up on the other side? So that's not something you would want to call the lifeboat out for or speak to the Coast Guard about, but in fact, it might save your blushes. But that's the good thing about these, if you can get them to work in the wet. Okay. You need to agree before you leave, where are we rowing, how far are we rowing, and when are we going to be back? Because then there's not an ugly surprise when you're half an hour from home and someone says, oh, my mum expects me back. So you need to figure that out first, and that way everybody has the same idea about the outing. I've written also, how far up the pier does the trolley need to go? Has anyone returned to a trolley underwater or floating?
Not yet.
Yeah, well, we have many times. Okay, so this is roughly what we're going to cover this weekend. We're not going to do races, we're not going to do expedition rowing, we're just going to do basic boat handling and the basic safety steps you need before you set off. Right. Some of this is about what you take with you. Actually, it's quite a minor part. The major part is your skills and your planning before you go out. But a part is what you might or might not have in the boat with you. So could you come down and just take a random item out of this box and go back to where you are, and then we can go around and you can either tell me why you think it's a useful thing to have in a boat, or why you think it's a totally useless thing to have in a boat, or you could ask what it is. So do you want to just come and grab one? Right, well, starting at this end.
I had a clue.
Can it,
No, he's cutting it here.
well, that's just because I took a bit out of the end of it. That's not an essential part of it.
Okay.
Can it? This is a piece of plastic water pipe. Can anyone think why you might need to carry something like that in a boat?
Is it for motivating the crew?
Yes, yes.
That's the marine in the room.
Ah, yeah, the only problem is it doesn't reach the front rower.
Yeah. Shocking.
Okay, you can. We
Tiller.
No, it's not tiller.
Is it to reach?
Yeah.
To reach?
To push off.
Maybe somebody or something?
Possibly. If I was in the water, I wouldn't really want to have to hold on to a slippery bit of plastic pipe. But potentially, you could. Yes, if there's someone in the water you don't wish to pick up, you could fend them off.
You could keep
So
charts
grabbing a
rolled
line?
up in it
Grabbing a line.
No,
to roll up charts.
it's for it's a skid. It's for going up the beach.
Oh, right.
If you're on any kind of expedition or picnic and you want to pull a boat up a beach and you don't want to damage the boat, it's kind of low friction. It doesn't actually rotate, but the boat slides across it, which is why, do you see the scratch? It's got scratch marks in the middle. We took three, we were on an expedition with 3 skiffs, and each skiff carried 3 of these just lying in the bilges. And when we came to a place, we would lay all 9 out, and then it was really easy to pull the boats up. So you wouldn't normally carry that, but if you were expecting to pull up a beach, that is a really useful thing. What do you think this is?
The sea anchor.
It is sort of a sea anchor, yes. But it's not really big enough to be a sea anchor in the normally accepted sense of the word. It's a drogue, and so clubs that do a lot of surf landings, so that might be Portobello, Eastern, North Berwick, Golspie, they all operate off beaches. If you're coming into a beach, there's a danger that you surf, and if you surf you go too fast and may lose control, slew round and roll over. So for those clubs that do that a lot, having that you could deploy from the stern, it slows the boat right down and it keeps the stern facing the waves. It's actually like hitting a brick wall. When you let that go and it grabs the water, you're down to about half a knot, and nothing on God's earth will make you go faster than that. What have you got?
A torch.
Okay, why might you want that?
If you get caught out in the dark unexpectedly,
Right.
you need it to read a chart, read instruments.
Okay. Or potentially attract the attention of
Signaling device.
a large ship heading your way. Small boats like skiffs are the only lights that you're supposed to carry are an all-round white, and that would count, I think. That one is a bit more directional, but if you know where someone's coming from, you could flash it at them. If it's the summer, you're probably not going to meet the darkness, and it might not be an issue. In the winter, if you're going out kind of 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you might think of doing that. What do we have?
A chart in a waterproof bag. So I presume you can put other things in the bag as well, like your phone.
You could, yes.
Sandwiches.
So,
And the chart.
yeah, sandwiches, the jam doesn't work with charts. I printed this off for this area because I'm not as familiar with it as you are. You can print off your own bespoke charts and not risk a proper chart. That's a much closer look at the harbour at Kylaken. So says where the water is and where it isn't. Always handy. Although in a skiff, if you can't see the bottom, you're unlikely to go aground. Okay, what we have?
20-metre rope length.
Okay.
The diameter, I don't really know. For a man overboard?
Well, yes. This is a throw bag. Yes. So can I just show you how it works? They're used, for instance, by kayakers. If on a river, on a like a whitewater river, you would throw it, and the weight of the bag full of rope gives you something to throw, and then it just pays out as it goes out, and the person you're aiming for has to then grab it. It's a floating rope and quite visible. If we carry it, it's not really for that purpose, though. It's for being the line on the drogue, because that bag can be stuffed behind the Cox's seat along with this all folded up, so that you just have to throw it overboard and it kind of pays out without tangling. Okay, what's the next item?
Life jacket.
Okay, that's my personal life jacket, so I hope it is in good condition and up to date. We'll maybe come to that in a minute. Yeah, we'll talk about them later. Do you have anything? Oh, yes, right.
Flares.
Okay. What do you think about flares?
You would certainly need a bit of user knowledge so as not to injure somebody, but yeah, it could be helpful if you got into a tricky situation.
Okay. Is there a date on that tin?
Don't ask me, I haven't got my specs on. 2003.
Uh-huh. Is that a good thing?
Unlikely.
You just let it go. Thanks. So that's one of the issues about flares. Another issue about flares is that you have to keep them away from small boys, because you would probably be responsible, or people would blame you if small boys got to them and let them off and burned themselves. Another issue with them is that they only last a few seconds. There's a rocket flare in there with a parachute, and that lasts for 12 seconds. So you don't get a very long duration for your distress signal. They are very visible. Are there any alternatives that anybody knows about?
Smoke flares. Smoke flares.
Yes, and I think there's at least one in there. You can get rechargeable high visibility LED flares which don't burn anybody, and they can run for 8 hours. And in some ways that is more useful. Also, they float and they don't run out. They don't, stop being useful. Coast Guard will now no longer accept out-of-date flares, because there's they have to drive. If you give them to the Coast Guard, there has to be 2 people in the vehicle when they drive the out-of-date flares to the disposal point. It's just ridiculous. So I would suggest that the day of flares is gone. What have you got?
Compass.
Would you use one of them?
Well, I suppose if you're in fog.
Okay, so do you ever get fog here? We get maybe one day a year.
Yeah, we get that.
Yeah. So in that situation, if you were out maybe past the bridge in the big bit, it would be handy to know which way to steer. Mm-hmm. So you might not carry that all the time, but on a foggy day, it would be handy.
Yeah.
Okay, what else do we have?
Raincoat.
Okay, so why might you carry another one of those?
Another one.
Well, I mean, apart from what the people were wearing. Well, it's not a trick question. It's just
For the Cox. The cold Cox.
yes. So there's a cold Cox problem. If you swap around,
Okay.
if you row and then Cox, you're going to get cold. If you Cox and then row, you're likely to overheat. So it may be useful to have something you could put on over your life jacket.
Yeah.
Although,
Just a temporary thing.
yes, which would keep the Cox a bit warmer.
Yeah.
What else do we have? What's that?
That's one of the safety blankets.
Okay. Why might you want one of them?
If someone gets cold. One of them.
Yes.
Or if they fall ill.
Falling in.
We're going to do some man overboard practice, and one of the reasons isn't that people fall out of skiffs, because I've never heard of anybody falling out of a skiff. But I have heard of 2 situations where skiff crews have rescued kayakers to their great benefit, I would say. And if you pull somebody out of the water, you are likely to have a hypothermia situation, and that's what that would be for. You only really get to use them once. They don't last, but they're not very expensive, and they're quite light and easy to carry. And what's this?
This is looks like a very old life jacket,
Yes.
and maybe would need to be tested before you might want to use it, because it has an air about it that it maybe hasn't been used for a while.
Yes, it's not in the first flush of youth. So, where would you look if you were looking for the cylinder? Where would you go?
Well, that I don't know, I'm afraid.
Well, feel it.
Here.
Is there a hard bit? Yes. Okay. Can you rip it open a little bit till we get to the? Because it's held together, that one, with Velcro.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. Okay.
So I think it should. Yeah.
Oh, it's all shiny and new in there.
Well, yes.
Okay, right.
So now
It's just got all dust and stuff in it. It's like, like batteries go weird when you leave them for too long.
there's actually no batteries in it,
No,
but
I know, but it's got that same kind of corrosion.
it's got corrosion on it.
Yeah.
Does the cylinder look disgusting? I mean, does it look completely beyond hope?
Well, not knowing
No.
anything about them, I'm not sure. But
Yes. Okay.
I wouldn't want to get in a
So there is a way of.
boat with this one on.
So there's a way of testing. There's a way of discovering whether the cylinder, in fact, contains any CO2 without letting it off. You can weigh it on a letter scale, and on the outside of the cylinder, they stamped the weight that it should be if it hasn't leaked.
It says here 33 grams. on this.
Yeah, but 33 grams is what is the weight of CO2 that should be in it. But actually stamped on the cylinder, they say something like 138, which is the weight of the cylinder plus the CO2.
Oh, I see. I can just see that here now. I need some better light to see it, but
Yeah, no, it's quite hard to read, and if it's at all corroded,
corroded over the top. I know.
yeah. So that is a way of testing it. But you're right, that I don't use that life jacket anymore. But
Training purposes only.
we've just had ours all tested, and that's another old
Maybe you have
one.
a similar one. I can't actually.
Yeah, so this is harder because it's got a zip,
Yeah,
and it's kind of hard to get into.
Yeah.
Can you feel where the cylinder is?
Here.
Yeah, so that's where you would look for it. That's meant for rowing. It's quite high. It comes up quite high on your chest, and so it doesn't get in the way of the rowing action. Any
A spare bung,
spare bung?
which maybe you should check before you go and make sure that it's in. But then if something happens, it's good to have a spare.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's very light. It's a plastic one, so.
And it's not going to suffer from being in the boat, so that's worth having. See the black rubber band round it? That's the O-ring seal, and if someone does it up too tight, the O-ring seal can break or come off, and then you're left with the white plastic bung with the screw thread, but doesn't actually keep the water out. So good to know that you've got one with an O-ring. We were has anyone been to the Ocean to City race in Cork?
Yep. Yeah.
We had a boat which it turned out, and the bung had bounced out somewhere on the journey. So they were about to enter the race and they had no bung. So they, quick thinking, they bought a bottle of Prosecco and drank it. And thus refreshed, they set off on their journey. But the problem with Prosecco is that it's got a rather low-grade cork made of crumbs of cork all glued together. And they were changing the cocks. You know, they were rotating the cocks during the race. So someone stood on the head of the bung and broke it off. And then the rest of it floated away, and then they were really in trouble. But fortunately, they were on the river section by that time. There's a little,
Did they?
there's a little wood. So they landed and found a twig of the right diameter and stuffed it in and carried on. So if we'd had a spare bung, that would have been helpful. Let's talk a bit about weather forecasts and how to find out what the time of the tide is. Does anyone have any favourite weather forecasts? What would you? XC. Okay. Yep. Yeah. So that's XC. Anyone use windy? What I hadn't realised is that you can get really quite close detail. Okay, so right now, that's what the wind's doing. The colour of those arrows is an indication of the speed, so that's in the 30s. And right now it's slanting across, so that's the ferry pier. The wind would be blowing the boat against the ferry pier, so that's a problem that we're going to have to encounter. Later in the day it's going to go around. So do you see the arrows are now coming from the west? So you can kind of get a customized forecast in your own circumstances, which is quite neat. I'm not paying for this. But it'll do snow, rain, anything. 35 different measures. So worth exploring. What about tides? What do people use for tides?
Either a book, we have a local book.
Oh, right, okay.
Open Tide Times.
Yes.
Or Tide and Tide Times. I think it's called something like that on
And is that like with the open ones, you have to add on or take away a number depending on where you are. Some of them are based in Dover, but I find
Tide Times is very accurate for small regions.
this one's called Tides, and it knows where you are and adjusts accordingly. You don't have to do anything. So do you see that we're just coming up to high tide? So I could climb out of the boat anywhere and it would know where I was and what the tides were doing. So I find that quite useful. So for this afternoon, what does that tell us?
Tide's going out.
Okay, and if the tide's going out, which way is it going?
In Killark, and it goes both ways. It goes two ways in Killark.
Okay, well, so on a large scale, it's going from left to right. It's heading from the west to the east. So where would that cut off? So this is local knowledge. Where would you, I mean, assuming that there's nothing happening much in here, how far out would you have to go before you hit the tidal stream?
It's about 50 metres off the point and you hit the tidal
About 50 meters
Get a wee eddy coming up
off.
on the shore.
Okay, so you
You can use the eddy coming back along the Calacan. It's going around the slipway and then coming along the Calacan shore, but only 50 yards out.
okay, so you would have to stick close and go along like that. Yeah. Okay, well, this is the sort of local knowledge that is really useful, and especially if you're going against the prevailing conditions. Would it be a sensible idea to head off down this way?
No.
Why would it not be a sensible idea?
You're going to fight against that coming back.
Okay, so you might be tired on the way home. You don't want to have the difficult journey on the way home. So always head off. Work out whether the tide or the wind is more important on that day. And this particular afternoon, both of them are heading left to right. So you definitely don't want to end up downwind and down tide. So if we feel brave and want to dice with this, we would be very sensible to go that way, not that way. Okay, so you've all got a way of finding out what the tides are and finding out what the forecast is, and you all need to turn up at a row with those two bits of information. Definitely the Cox should know both of those things. Does anyone know what happens if you get wind against tide?
You get a lot of chop.
Oh, do you know why?
One's opposing the other.
Yes. But what's actually happening is that the the waves meet the tide and they kind of slow down. But the same number of waves every minute is arriving, and so they all get closer together. And because they're closer together, they're also steeper, and they tend to start falling over. And so, as you said, surf. You get breaking waves, which
Standing waves.
Sometimes standing, and so that can be quite a nasty situation. And it's not in shallow water; it can be in deep water, but just with a strong tidal stream, which you will definitely get in this channel. So today, will we get that?
Not until the tide turns.
No. So the good thing is we won't get wind over tide, but the bad thing is we'll have to battle against both of them together if we want to make any progress. Okay.
You can get. There's two tides.
Okay.
Here. They run both ways. The stronger tide picks up later and goes under the bridge.
Right.
So in the middle of the tide run, it can go both ways. Also down through Kyleray, through the Narrows.
Yes.
Which is the lesser of the volume of water.
Yes.
So you can get a changeover point where you'll start get wind against tide.
Yes.
In the westerly direction.
Yes. So this is local knowledge that you guys need, and the rest of us probably won't acquire unless we spend a lot of time here. But very much worth knowing. And if you run an event where people are coming from outside, which actually is the case today, you need to tell the other people about it. When we're running a regatta, I start getting cautious at about 20 miles an hour steady and 30 gusts. Our loch is fairly sheltered, and the prevailing wind, the southwesterly wind is blowing across the loch, so there aren't any big waves. If it's blowing up the loch or down the loch, that makes it worse because the waves get bigger. But today we're over the 30 mile an hour gust criterion, which is why I wouldn't go for a social row today. But because we're limiting ourselves to a very sheltered pool inside the harbour here, and we're on a weather shore, so will I explain that? Let's go back to how we are today. Right, So that's the current wave. The wind situation is off the land, off Skye, blowing across towards Kyle of Loch Alsh. If you're here, the land is to the weather of you, in other words, upwind. So this is a weather shore. If you allow yourselves to cross the channel to Kyle of Loch Alsh, you're on a lee shore. And a lee shore is a bad situation because the wind is blowing you onto the shore and the waves are likely to damage you. You know, if you hit a shore with waves breaking on it, your boat will be matched wood quite quickly. So this is a weather shore and sheltered. When I say sheltered, I mean waves. There are absolutely no waves. So who was with me today? You agree, there were absolutely no waves in here at all. There was wind, quite a bit of it, and quite a lot of rain, but there weren't any waves, and we can handle wind. So, although there will be gusts over 30 miles an hour in the harbour, that on its own isn't enough to put us off. Okay, so that's, I guess, the special circumstances for today, why I think it's safe. Now,
Sorry, if it's
yes?
high tide at the moment,
Yes.
so by the time we go out, say in what, 2 or 3 hours,
Yes, it's going to be ebbing.
so it's going to be ebbing. So
Quite
there's not going to
fast.
be that much room in the harbour.
Well, the amount of room in the harbour will be diminishing. Has anyone used Navionics? So this is a free version of the Navionics software. You have to zoom in to where you're going. And as you can see, the chart gets more detailed as you zoom in. Now, do you see there's an enormous number of depth contours? Do you know why that is?
Some scale.
This is not, let me show you. This is the public chart. So there's not that many, there are not that many coordinates. There are not that many, but they've also got a thing called sonar chart, which is not crowd-funded, but crowd-sourced. So anyone with a certain make of sonar is sending data home, and you get that. And this is free, and you can print it. You know, you can do a screenshot and print it. So you were saying this green is what is mud or sand, dries out at extreme low tide. We're not at extreme low tide, but that's where we're heading. So there is a deep pool in the middle with shallow edges. We're safe at the end of the ramp, which is where we would be using it anyway, at all states of the tide. But it gets shallow here, and here, and here. But is it the end of the world if we touch the bottom? With no waves?
It's fine as long as you don't do it at speed, isn't it?
We're not going to be travelling fast. Most of it is probably sand or mud. There'll be the odd rock. We need to be careful. But is it life-threatening?
No.
Okay, so I'm prepared to go aground a couple of times. It doesn't bother me. So mentally, you just need to know that the deep bit's there, and today we'll probably be able to go into the fringes of it.
If I just go back to this question here about the wind speed. Is that okay? Just to say, in Calacan we tend to have a rule that we go out up to 20 miles per hour. but it very much depends on the wind direction, because we found that we had an awful lot of easterlies through the winter, which is you would think is unusual, but they were persistent. And actually, an easterly when on XC for Calacan it says 6 to 8, and you get there and you've got light caps, and it was really tricky launching right on.
Sure.
So
Easterlies.
It funnels up, you know, the
It does funnel.
conditions can funnel it, and even on supposedly the most accurate weather
Yes.
forecast, it's not the actual conditions can make it. Yeah. So
And
if you're in Portree, is it or yeah? So you'd need, and the wind can really come over the hills there in unusual gusts and directions. So it just depends on the direction.
so easterly.
We use 50
Yeah.
mile per hour as a general.
It's very, sorry, yes, you're right. I should have said the direction is crucial. This is a sheltered site for the prevailing wind, but easterlies are a pain because all the harbours that we use are harbours that face east, for the very good reason that the bad winds come from the west. So easterlies tend to upset everybody. And you're right to say all this winter has been a long long days and days, weeks and weeks of easterly winds. That is a pain. You're right. We could just start with ready to row, and then easy all at the end. So we'll row up there and stop. Okay.
And you're rowing.
And I'm rowing. You're Cox.
So you're stroke.
Well, I'm all four rowers.
All
In
four
fact,
rowers.
yeah, it's really impressive, isn't it? Okay.
Okay, attention of the boat. Everybody ready? Ready to row. Forward to row. And in.
Whoa, all right, sorry, yeah, okay.
And easy oars.
Right, okay, thank you. Right, you're in luck, it's not raining. We need people to form up in twos to be Cox and boat. And then halfway through you can swap round and the person who was the boat can be the Cox. Now, we need to slightly standardise the orders. I know that different clubs have different orders, and this has been a problem from the word go. I used to say give way together, which is the Admiralty way of doing it, but in fact, having seen what everybody else does, we do now ready to row, row. So that's what I'm going to do with you guys today, is ready to row, row. And then at the end, when you want to stop, it will be easy all. Not easy oars, but easy all, because you could say easy port or easy starboard. So easy all is easy all the rowers in the boat. It doesn't mean row slowly, it means stop. I'm sorry if that conflicts with what other clubs are using, but it's the nearest to a standard set of orders that I have detected in all the clubs I've rowed with. Okay, so it would be ready to row, row. Easy all. Now easy all means you don't put the oars back in the water, you just hold them up and the boat drifts forward. If you want to stop the boat, you say dig in or hold her up. And that means that stops the boat more quickly. What about rowing backwards? Okay, you need to introduce the word.
We just say backwards row.
Backwards, yes, okay, so ready to row backwards, row. So do you see what I'm doing? I'm telling the rowers what I want them to do, but not yet. There's a little bit of a pause, and then I'm saying row. So there's a descriptive phrase that tells you what we're about to do, but you don't start doing it then. It's row. Unless someone says, stop! in which case you stop. Right. If you want only one side to row, you have to tell port or starboard oars to row. You have to say port or starboard first to get their attention. Oh, they'll think, I'm a port rower. So, port side, row. Is this the port side? I got it right. Because I'm facing the wrong way. I mean, okay, so you have to figure out, in fact that might be a good thing to do at the beginning of any session, is port rowers, put your hand up. Yeah. Starboard rowers, put your hand up. Because you're going to be moving through the boat and you're going to alternate between port and starboard. You may forget. I may forget. So, good to have it in your mind whether you're a port rower or a starboard rower. It might be very good in this, depending on the situation. When you're being a human skiff, I want you to model what happens when you row on one side. So, port side row. You need to kind of figure out which way you should be walking backwards. So I'm getting you to do this. This, despite it being not very dignified, the reason I want you to do this is that it's a very low stakes way of figuring out which way a boat goes when you paddle on one side. You're not going to damage any paintwork.
Practicing in the car park. That's great.
Well, so you're not in front of a big crowd of people. I have done this with, in fact, over at the King Haakon Bar, there were quite a lot of people watching, and it was in the summer, and so there were quite, there was. But here, I think we'll be in perfect privacy. So, could you all put a coat on or something appropriate to the great outdoors, and we'll go outside.
Ready to row?
Yep.
Row. Starboard only. All the way around. And then all together. And easy oars. Stop.
I'm going to say easy all, and then we're still going to probably be moving a bit, and we're coming up quite close, and now I'm going to say dig in.